So we are very excited to get together to talk about the latest episode of Star Trek Discovery. And this episode is called Past is the Prologue. And it's one of the last episodes of this season. And it was a pretty jam-packed episode. Would you agree, Tom?
It felt like a finale.
It did. I agree. And maybe part of that was because it was the kind of the closing of this, at least it felt like a closing of this sort of mirror universe arc. And were you surprised that they closed it so quickly?
Yeah, I was. I thought, actually, this isn't the first time. I've been consistently pleasantly surprised at how fast this show moves.
Mm-hmm.
Because and some of it is that, especially in terms of Star Trek, I'm used to shows like Deep Space Nine or 24, or like there's so many episodes they have to do that it stretches, and you're like, oh god, just can we move the plot forward, please, a little bit? And so you sort of sit through stuff, and you sort of you try to just enjoy the ride, right? Especially if it's a show you already enjoy. But I do get a little bit impatient with the plot not moving fast enough. But this, it just moves like a rocket. It's just great.
Yeah. They really have, when you think about this season, they really have packed a ton of story into, 13 episodes, I think, that they have so far.
I think 13 or 15.
Something like
15.
that, yeah. Pretty impressive.
I think we've got two more. We're due two more.
And I was thrilled because I did not like the mirror episodes. I struggled with them, and I just tonally, they were not my thing. I didn't enjoy them. And so this felt back to the kind of thing that I like, where it was a mixture of tones and a mixture of, it just didn't leave me feeling as sort of joyless and frustrated as the last couple episodes did. And so I was really happy.
You're making me think of a Churchill quote: "If you're going through hell, keep going." Oh.
Yeah, that's right. So so I was really thrilled and surprised, and it's gonna be interesting to see now what they do next, and it makes me really excited for our final episodes of the season and what they're gonna do.
Yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised that they keep us guessing. I have no idea what's coming. I really don't. I mean, I think the writers recognize that a major danger you can fall into with prequels is that all the conclusions are foregone, especially if you know the characters.
Right.
So you could argue that the Star Wars prequel suffered from that. We knew where this was all going. We knew Obi-Wan Kenobi wasn't going to die.
Right.
We knew that Anakin was going to turn to the dark side. This was all spoiled for us, and there was very little done to surprise us,
right,
or make us go, "Whoa, I didn't see that coming." Right. Especially since we don't know the characters, and there's enough distance from the other stuff we know that who knows where this is going. I mean, there are some limits that canon places on them, but I'm surprised with how much they've been able to do with the prequel.
Yeah, me too. And I think maybe part of it is because, they've had a little bit with just that little mention of Spock and just like a few little things, but these are different characters. These are different, different situations. It feels quite different. But still, even, it makes you think, like, what are they going to do in another season? They've checked so many boxes and had so much story in the first season, but found the big reveal last week was that you have Lorca is Terran. He's a part of this dark mirror universe.
Right. And we don't know we have no idea of the fate of Prime Lorca.
Right. Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see if we're going to, do you think that we will meet, I guess, Prime Lorca or Federation Lorca?
I think it's too tempting for them to just cast him off and say, "Oh yeah, he died a long time ago," or something like that. I think he's just too interesting, and there are too many questions. And he he portrayed a really compelling and interesting guy.
Mm-hmm.
And unlike any Starfleet captain we've ever seen, and now we know why he's unlike any Star Trek captain we've ever seen. Yeah.
Now, so at the beginning of this episode, we hear from Lorca, and do you think do you think that it was a little too on the nose as far as like sort of the Trump analogies? Like they have him saying, Terrans need a leader who preserve our way of life, our race, and they'll make the Empire glorious again. Is that a little on the nose?
Perhaps, but that is also Star Trek, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly, you're talking about the franchise that produced an episode where an alien who's half black and half white is enemies with a guy from his same planet who's half white and half black. You know, the colors are switched.
Right.
Could it be more bonk bonk on the head a message than that? Right. So it is a little bonk bonk on the head to be talking about, to be alluding to Trump in that way. But at the same time, Star Trek has always served its time. So the time in which it was created. So they're reaching to do that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, I felt like it was pretty, it was kind of I think it was just enough cold water to make you stop and go, wait, what are they trying to say? And try to read something into it. Mm-hmm. But when you go to look for it, it's not obvious, and it's not ham-fisted, and it's not overly over the top.
Yeah, what do you think they were trying to say with it?
A big message I got is that, you know, the dark parts of yourself aren't so distant as you might think, and the things that you think only your enemy would do are also the things you would do. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thrust of this, and I like that message a lot. Because it wasn't they didn't stop and say, look at the camera and say, we're very concerned about politics, and if you didn't vote the way we voted, you must be a bad person. They didn't do that. They actually said, are we as good as we think we are?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really true about that. Like, I guess to be wary of people that to sort of be wary of people who are trying to puff you up too much, you know?
Yeah, and flatter you, yeah.
Yeah, and also the idea of that, the idea of sort of people promising to protect you, that you should always sort of have us take a step back and be like, wait a minute here, because that can be a very sort of comforting thing of like, I'm going to keep you safe. Mm-hmm. And you see that all the time with domestic violence and everything. So, you know, that like the flip side of sort of, obviously they're attacking you, but they also often sort of promise protection. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to protect my family, therefore I'm going to, you know, there's a weird sort of flip dynamic there. And I thought it was interesting. He says, the Federation is a social experiment doomed to failure. Mm-hmm. Childish idealism, every species, every choice, every opinion is not equal. No matter how much they want it to be, the strong and capable always rise.
Yeah, what's eerie about that is that he's not wrong about that. Mm-hmm. I like a story where the villain makes a good point.
Yeah.
That's what I love about Dark Knight, is where you kind of go, you know what, he's right. We would eat each other if we just missed a few meals, but that's not all we are, right? And that's the piece he's missing. Mm-hmm. And that's what Lorca's missing, is that, yeah, hierarchy matters. I want the best brain surgeon working on my brain. I want the hierarchy serves me there, right? I can't just write it off because racism, right?
Well, it's sort of like, you know, like Satan in the you know, sort of the war in heaven. Like he sort of promises to protect people from, you know, and he wants to, and that the people, he wants people to just follow him and be saved from all this pain. But there's that other side of him that he also wants the glory himself, and that he wants to be better than God. So it's like there's sort of this like this lie hidden within the sort of truth. And so what's interesting about this quote in particular is that him say starting out with childish idealism, and because that's the part of it that I think's kind of the lie, is that like is the hope is not childish idealism. And but yes, it is true that there's obviously differences in all of our abilities and all of our things, but you have to have the hope. Like that's the most in a way sort of grown-up thing we can do.
To acknowledge what's grown up, what makes it grown up is that when you acknowledge the difficulty and you acknowledge the darkness, you acknowledge the edge that you have in yourself. But what's childish idealism is when you don't, and you may have a point about Starfleet. What's childish idealism is if you think you're just great and there's no, Deep Space Nine addresses this theme as well, that there's an episode where Captain Cisco says, he's on the edge of a war zone, and he's like, back on Earth, people look out their windows and they see paradise. It's like there's an innocence about Gene Roddenberry's future that is nice, but there's a danger of it being naive and uninformed and in that way kind of toxic. Yeah, it's really interesting because you have this sort of dynamic of this person promising to protect you on the same breath that they want to take your freedoms from you. It's like this interesting dynamic, and like the ideal of whether it's the American dream or the whatever that or the Federation or whatever you want to say may be an actual ideal, but we're a heck of a lot better like going for that and trying than we are sort of the seeking this other option that he paints in this interesting way. It's just a really interesting dynamic, especially when you consider the way he kind of is trying to puff the people up too at the same time. It's he's saying that they're not equal, and yet he's saying how great they are at the same time, which is really interesting. I thought that this was getting back to sort of, I remember talking a couple of episodes ago about like Star Trek is about utopia. It's about hope. And like I've had felt like, what is this? Like, I don't want this show. And it is very similar how I felt about Batman v Superman, that like Superman is supposed to, and Man of Steel, that to me, Superman is supposed to be about hope. And it totally lost that to me. And I don't know. So it's just, it was making me nervous. And so I was so excited for this episode that I just felt like we're back to what I like about the franchise, and maybe you had to kind of go to some of those dark places to kind of make this as exciting and as fulfilling as it was. But anyway, it was just really cool, I thought, this whole dynamic. Oh yeah. And what I'm really, as our conversation is unfolding here, I'm realizing they're not just producing entertainment here. They're really taking this seriously. This is Star Trek, like working on itself. This is Star Trek developing itself as an idea and as what it's supposed to do for us and help us with. I think that's great. I love that it's living and growing. Yeah. And it's not like, I remember saying, this better not be some kind of cautionary tale, because that would be very annoying to me. Like if it was like, ooh, if you follow Trump or whatever, then horror was going to be turned into this dystopian and whatever. So I'm so glad to see that it's more nuanced than that. Oh, indeed. It's more interesting than that. Yeah. So, well, now we have Emperor Giorgio. Yeah. In the Prime Universe. And it's very interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And it suddenly, this she's introduced as a monster, right?
But
And they're getting
also,
to know the monster. That's cool.
yeah, and also this episode was also like fun. I think that people that aren't into the sort of more heady, philosophical whatever
Sure.
kind of stuff, like that hallway fight scene on the thing, that was fun, I thought. And
Oh yeah, lots of
yeah,
pew pew and sword fights and kicky punch and
yeah, it was really good. And then the fight scene at the end was also really good. The or towards the end, that I thought was pretty cool.
yeah. I
And
was. I want to talk to you about Star Wars because I was having the thought. Oh, they're doing Star Wars kind of.
yeah,
What do you
those
What
two
do you think
fights.
about that?
For sure. I think I even tweeted it out like, oh, this feels very Star Warsy to me. And I think probably part of that is because I've just been like obsessed with these Rey and Kylo fighting the guards things. I just think they're so funny. I just love it so much.
Yeah.
And it makes me laugh. And so I've seen a lot of that fight. And so I think that's part of the reason why I felt some of these fight scenes felt a
Oh,
little
gotcha.
Star
Yeah.
Warsy for me. But
Funny.
but yeah,
I was thinking about the space stuff. I was thinking about the mycelial sphere or whatever it is,
yeah.
and its destructive the power to destroy all life.
Mhm.
And having to hit it at just the right place at the right time. That felt Star Warsy to me, but
Yeah, that's true too. And just some of the yeah, just the action and some of the dynamics felt a little Star Warsy to me, which is fine. Um and
one thing you can say about Star Wars versus Star Trek, I think where Star Wars has been a little stronger, is that they don't get too heady with the tech, right? And whereas Star Trek traditionally has, and the problem that Star Trek has had is where they have sort of a Deus ex machina where they tech the tech and wave their hands and it's fixed because
mhm.
tech. And there wasn't any of that here. Not that was obvious to me.
Yeah, well, and Star Wars, I think, has become full on fantasy. It's a
Yeah,
fantasy show, and it used to be a little more, I think, sci-fi fantasy, but I really felt like with The Last Jedi, like we are fantasy. It's a fantasy series, and whereas I feel like Star Trek is way more sci-fi than Star
yeah.
Wars, way, 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 way more.
Though
So.
in itself, it is also fantasy because it's in its own ways. But it's not what you'd call hard SF.
Mhm.
They use real science as a leaping off point, but they don't feel constricted by it.
Yeah, but there's I don't know, like everything feels kind of grounded in like human beings and this could actually
Sure.
be in the future, whereas like I've lost that as far as Star Wars for me. Like it's like a like
It's a fairy tale.
it's a fairy tale. Yeah, it is. It's a fairy tale, which is fine. But it's just it's just different.
Yeah.
So anyway, uh yeah, but it was fun while also being interesting, also being hopeful, having something to say. And so I was really digging this episode. And it's interesting with Lorca because he's a pretty complex character, I mean, I haven't watched all of the shows.
Hmm.
But it seems like he is one of the most sort of complex captains that they've had. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. He reminds me a lot of Cisco.
Mm-hmm.
Um, though Cisco's a nicer guy, but at the end of the day, and a more decent guy. But Cisco also has this edge, and he understands his edge. There's a if you yeah, I can't recommend Deep Space Nine enough, honestly. But there's a scene in the first episode where Picard and Cisco meet, and Picard as he had been assimilated by the Borg, and in the process of being captured and assimilated, he served the Borg, and in the service of the Borg, he killed Cisco's wife. So their meeting is not a cool, fun fan service crossover. It's an icy meeting, and it's not nice. This is a guy who's been through some crap, and yeah. Anyway, I won't.
Right.
Do
That's
too much more on
interesting.
DS9, but yeah, he's got an edge like Lorca.
Mm. So, did you understand the whole sort of I don't know, convoluted sort of thing with the mycelial network and how they like Sharon or whatever was going to use it to like destroy everybody, or what was that all about? I was a little lost.
Well,
They had this
from what I
energy orb.
understand, yeah, from what I understand is that the mycelial network is kind of like the Force, but for Star Trek. It's not mystical. It's definitely grounded in science. Like they don't build any mysticism around it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the midi-chlorians, and it's only midi-chlorians. So you know what I mean? Like
Right.
there was no religion around it. It's just, oh, all life is connected in this very particular scientific way, and this is how it's done. And I'm sure it's just, I don't think there's any reality to it. I think it's an idea, and again, Star Trek's taking an idea and using it as a leaping off point,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like warp drive. That's pretty fantastic. We're talking about immense amounts of energy that we may not ever be able to produce, but
Mm-hmm.
theoretically, because of what Einstein taught us about how space and gravity and time interact, you could stretch space. So space apparently is malleable. You could stretch space so that where you want to go is closer to you, and where you don't want to go is all behind you, and that's what warp drive theoretically does.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
So
it
like,
takes that real idea and just runs with it.
yeah. So like this mycelial network, it's like it's the spores. It's what the spore drive have, but like for everything, right?
Well, the spore drive is meant to navigate the mycelial network.
Okay.
It's meant to sort out the way that all life and all real and all of the universe is interconnected.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the object there. That's the point there.
Okay. So the Sharon chip, it wants to harvest. It uses this energy orb, and they want to like take all of this network and this energy, and it will like destroy everybody. And so Burnham goes, and she joins with Giorgio to defeat Lorca, and she says both versions of me betrayed both versions of you, and then she says I won't let that happen again.
What was beautiful about that? I predicted that she would save Philippa. I predicted that. I saw that coming. I mark my like go back and look at last week's discussion. I said that she would do that.
Yeah.
But when she did it, it stunned me.
Mm-hmm.
This is masterful writing. Like I predicted it, but when she actually did it, I went.
Yeah.
I love it.
It was good.
So good.
It really was. It really was so good. And I'm so glad that we got to see more of Giorgio, and because I was bummed, in the premiere, because I was just like so excited to have like I was thinking, boy, they promised this really diverse cast, and in the first two episodes, we lose one to prison, and one of our diverse cast was to prison, and one is dead, and we have a white male captain again. I'm like, oh, that was lame. So this was kind of cool to see kind of come around like this.
And you can, I'm starting to see now why the showrunners were saying, be patient with us.
Yeah.
Reserve your judgments.
Right. And so they find out, Tilly and Stamets figure out that they can ride the mother of mycelial shockwaves and be able to get out of this situation. Right. And so there's kind of that going on. And Giorgio and Burnham meet Lorca, and Giorgio says, I'm destined to kill you. And he says that would be an impressive trick. And so you get this sort of back and forth.
Mm-hmm. And the obvious setup,
yeah. One thing I wondered about, how do you feel about like Ash not being in this episode at all, Tyler?
That was weird, and I did notice.
No Klingons.
I think Volk is dead, and L'Rell had really nothing to do. I think definitely we're back to Klingon City here. Not least wise because they've just about won the war, apparently.
Recovering or something. I don't know. I just for some reason
I have a feeling that he'll never be the same.
Mhm.
So we'll see how that goes. I think they're doing it. I think that's right. I don't think he's better now. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
wow, that was weird, right? See you next week. That's the kind of thing that the original series or even Next Gen would do. Like
Mhm.
something catastrophically bizarre would happen to a character, and the next week they're fine. Or they've forgotten all about it, or something similar happens to someone else, and no one mentions, "Hey, remember that time?"
Yeah.
So yeah, none of that business here.
Well,
I think it's flowing in a natural way.
yeah, we'll get back to him for sure. But so Burnham says to Lorca, they've got this really cool fight sequence. It's really good. And Burnham says, "We would have helped you get home if you had asked."
Yeah.
That was a great moment, I thought. Really good.
Yeah, very Star Trek moment. It reminded me of in 2009, the Star Trek movie from 2009,
Uh-huh.
just called Star Trek, where they've got Nero on the ropes, right? He's getting sucked into the black hole. And
Right.
Kirk calls him and says, you look, you're done, you're toast. You require assistance, which we are willing to provide, right? And
Right.
that's Star Trek.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that, but you're right. That is a good example. You gave him the chance to save him,
Yeah.
but they didn't. And that's when Giorgio kills Lorca, and that was a pretty epic moment.
Yeah.
And then Giorgio just like doesn't want to for it, but Burnham kind of grabs Giorgio, and they go back to the Discovery. And Giorgio says, "What have you done to me?"
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting. So, and then our sort of our final moment of the episode is they get back to the correct timeline, except they're now 9 months ahead, and the Klingons have won the war. What do you think of that?
Yeah. This is an example of where I'm going, wow, I did not see that coming.
Mm-hmm.
I wondered what they come back to, because there was this sense of like, we come back and everybody's a pigeon. Like, like what bizarro reality are they going to jump into?
Yeah.
um, um, or everybody has a twin now. That everyone's twins. Like,
Yeah.
Star Trek has done some such bonkers stuff. It's like you don't know what else is there to do. But anyway, it wasn't quite as bizarro as that. But still,
That's
it's
true.
like, ooh, this is weird. Like, we're learning Star Trek history that we never knew before.
It is true. A lot changed in 9 months here.
Yeah, because
But
remember, somewhere out there
yeah,
is Captain Pike, and in chart and is captain of the Enterprise.
yeah,
Lieutenant
that's
James
true.
T. Kirk is serving on the Farragut. Like, these characters are out there living their lives, so like this is stuff they're going to have remembered, apparently.
Right, right. Yeah, that's true. It kind of reminds me of an episode of The Simpsons where is the he's got a toaster that he pushes down and it takes him to these alternate realities, and he keeps going back, and finally he gets to one, and it's like the only difference is that they all have lizard tongues, and he's
Right.
like, "Oh, close enough."
Yeah, or the Rick and Morty stuff too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting thing because you have Burnham having basically started the war, and in a way at the beginning, and so now we're going to end off this season with her kind of dealing with the worst case scenario for the ending of the war.
Yeah, and
So,
this is the real kind of all is lost moment for Burnham, because her story arc is redeeming herself from starting this war, redeeming herself from making these terrible decisions.
mm-hmm.
And now that couldn't be further. Like, so far it was looking great. She had matured. She even sort of saved Philippa, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sort of brought her back from the dead, kind of.
Yeah.
And then the rug gets pulled out from under her feet, the war she started is almost over and they're losing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited. The next episode is called The War Without, The War Within. So it's going to be great. It's going to be great. And then our final is Will You Take My Hand is the final one of the season. And so I think this is going to end really well. I loved this episode. I just thought it was great. And
How
it
did
was
you like acting Captain Saru's speech?
Oh, that was good. That was good too. I should have written down some quotes from that, but yeah, he's been a really interesting character to follow through this whole season as well, don't you think?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. He's great. He reminds me of Picard. I hope he gets command because they're grooming him to do that. I think I'll be kind of surprised if they don't. Because he's especially that episode early on where like he's referencing his heroes and he's like, computer, tell me to do what they would do, and at the end of that episode, gloriously he throws it off and says, no, never mind. Like I don't, they'll do what they would do. If I'm going to be a great captain, I'm going to do what I would do.
Yeah, it's interesting because he definitely has some feel of Picard. There's also there's been moments where he's felt sort of like Spock to me. He's very interesting because he can be humble, but he can also be opinionated and kind of set in his ways.
Right. He has his own little flaws. But yeah, what's cool is that if he's the final captain of Discovery, like this, he's the captain. He'll be the first Star Trek captain who's an alien.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Never done that.
Yeah. That would be really interesting. Excited. I would give this one an A. I just really liked it and had something to think about. It didn't feel just joyless. It felt, I don't know, it just had everything. But it wasn't like a fluffy episode. It was just great. I just loved it. So, and it was so well made, so well executed. And I thought they just did a great job. And one thing I wanted to talk about really quick is just this article that I found where they're talking about Hulu and Netflix and everything like that. But they said here that Star Trek Discovery has it says what's interested me though is Star Trek Discovery demand expressions, which is like a sort of a way of like calculating internet discussion, all the different things, social media, whatever.
Measuring how it talked about online it's being.
Yeah. So better known as the number of people talking about a show. And they said that Star Trek Discovery has more than 53 million people talking about it in the US. And they said that beats The Walking Dead, which has around 46 million. Stranger Things with 33 million. So, I mean, you think how big of a thing Stranger Things was. This is way more than Stranger Things. And, way more than Game of Thrones, way more than, other popular shows. And this is that it's creating more hype than almost any digital original show or that comes from any purely online service, and even traditional TV is not doing as well as Star Trek Discovery. And I don't know. I was just curious. It says it's an interesting thing because we don't know how many subscribers there are to All Access, but it's pretty interesting that a show that not that many people can. It's not like it's so easily accessible that it's that commanding of a point of discussion. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Oh yeah, it's really encouraging. It's kind of weird because like effectively streaming is a new medium, the way television was in like the 50s or the 60s. So like we almost don't know how to measure its success, but like this is a good start. Let's see. I'm looking up like the one of the highest rated episodes of all time of Next Gen. Let me see what the numbers were. Oh yeah, I'm not seeing any hard numbers about roughly how many millions of people, but yeah, it sounds like it's shaping up to at least be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with Next Gen in its success.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's very cool. And
obviously it's like different dynamics, but like a solid hit on a cable show is like a pretty good numbers is like 5 million.
Right. Yeah.
Like, so, and this is people talking, so it's different, but still, like, this is just doing extremely well. And I think because because it touches on so many different points of interest for people. You've obviously got the Star Trek science fiction kind of fandom, but you also have it appeals to people of color, it appeals to women, it appeals to LGBT, it appeals to so many different kinds of people that are drawn to check out the show, see what they're doing, and it's also, I just think, so freaking well made, so good.
Yeah. And it's amazing too. Like,
cinema level. I mean, this is cinema level. They did not have to go to this much. They did not have to make it this good. Like,
exactly.
They could have skimmed by, and people would have still watched, and it would have been fine. And but they could have just done some fan servicey thing that people would have liked, and it would have been fine. But they didn't, and people are talking about it because of that.
Yeah, they've taken a lot of risks, and I think those risks are paying off. And yeah, the numbers are amazing, especially when you consider that, like, I'm one of these people, but there's people who are forking over every month just to watch this.
Yeah, me too.
I'm sorry, but young Sheldon holds no appeal for me. There's nothing else on CBS All Access that I'm just drooling to see. That's it. I mean,
the only other thing I watch, well, I actually do watch The Big Bang Theory, but the only other thing I watch on CBS is Survivor, but I don't need this access to watch Survivor.
Right, exactly. There's nothing else. There's nothing on there that I can't find somewhere else, or just wait and get it later. Except this.
Excited about it, and I'm excited about this episode, and excited for the last two. It's gonna be fun. Really fun. So
here we go.
Yeah. So we will meet again sometime next week to talk about the war without and the war within. And thanks for joining me to talk about it, and for keeping me sane during those tough episodes.
No problem.
So where can people find you?
At Almano Roboto on Twitter, or also at Happy Place Poems.
Sweet. Okay, great. I'll have that in the description section. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews on iTunes and YouTube, and Smiling LDS on social media. And that will be great. And we will talk next week.